7th of October 2025, the war we thought was confined to front lines once again breached a line many considered secure, deep inside Russian-held territory. In a coordinated wave of strikes that Ukrainian officials and independent outlets have since reported, Ukrainian forces struck at least 3 high-value logistics and energy nodes inside Russia and occupied Crimea, a Sverdlov ammunition plant in Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, an oil distribution terminal in occupied Crimea, and a weapons depot servicing Russia's 18th Combined Arms Army. Russian authorities acknowledged unprecedented drone incursions across multiple regions and said hundreds of aerial targets had been detected and intercepted, but they also confirmed fires and damage at several industrial sites. This was not an accidental brush of skirmishry. It was a deliberate, strategic campaign to disrupt the arteries of Moscow's war machine, and it marks a new escalation that will reverberate across the theater and beyond. The first, most immediate consequence is simple. Logistics and fuel sustain armies. Ammunition plants, oil terminals, and forward depots are the quiet enablers of any offensive operation. By hitting a munitions plant in Nizhny Novgorod, a facility responsible for producing shells, propellant charges, and components, Ukraine is targeting the production base that replenishes Russian units. The reported fires and damage there will not only slow shipments in the coming days and weeks, they force Russia to divert repair crews, firefighting assets, and security units away from the front lines. An attacked oil terminal in Crimea does something equally devastating in its domain. It constrains fuel flows to Black Sea and Southern Theater operations. When fuel lines rupture or storage capacity drops, mechanized maneuver is hamstrung. Ships, armor, and logistics convoys all feel the pinch. And a struck weapons depot that supplies the 18th Combined Arms Army directly reduces the flow of spare parts, ammunition, and repair capacity to a formation that is engaged on Ukraine's southern and western axes. Combined, these 3 strikes form a coordinated blow to sustainment, the unseen but decisive factor in modern campaigns. The scale and sophistication of the operation raised eyebrows across intelligence circles. Russian statements reported that 251 drones were intercepted across 14 regions, a defensive tally that suggests both the breadth of the incursion and Moscow's awareness that Ukraine is improving the range, endurance, and coordination of its strike packages. Moscow framed the events as masked Ukrainian drone aggression aimed at destabilizing Russian security inside its own borders. Kyiv, by contrast, framed the strikes as legitimate counter-logistics operations, intended to degrade Moscow's ability to continue a punitive campaign against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure, especially as winter approaches and energy resources become strategically decisive. Reporters and satellite imagery have confirmed so far is consistent with the claim set. Fires at industrial sites, satellite evidence of explosions or thermal anomalies at certain facilities on the night in question, and local emergency response activity where Russian officials acknowledged incidents. Ukrainian officials say they struck these targets. Russian authorities confirm incidents in multiple regions. Independent imagery supports fire and damage in certain locations. That triangulation gives confidence in the broad story, even while allowing for uncertainty on the microscopic operational claims. Strategically, this operation should be viewed as a step change. For much of the conflict, both sides accepted a certain geography of risk: front lines, rear areas, and second-line logistics zones. The strikes show Ukraine is increasingly able and willing to reach rear nodes, long thought beyond practical reach, and to do so in a way that multiplies operational effect. Put bluntly, Ukrainian strategy here is designed not just to contest the front, but to throttle the flow of munitions and fuel that allows the front to be held or pushed. The effect is not instantaneous. A burned factory does not remove shells from a field the next day. But over weeks, supply chains degrade, stocks run lower, and operational tempo can slip. Moscow must then decide where to allocate scarce air defenses and engineering capacity to patch factories, guard fuel hubs, or keep men and materiel on the front line. Each choice carries trade-offs that Kyiv hopes will compound into a strategic advantage. From Russia's perspective, the response calculus is fraught. The Kremlin's immediate channels reacted with firm rhetoric, promising retaliation, and regional governors emphasized interception rates to reassure domestic audiences. But sound tactical defense across a vast geography is expensive. To guard infrastructure hundreds of kilometers from the front requires more air defenses, more patrols, more hardened storage, and more redundancy. Those are not costs paid for politically or logistically without consequence. Moscow may accelerate hardened, dispersed storage and continuous air defense readjustment, but every adaptation eats into resources that otherwise sustain offensive operations. NATO capitals, EU energy authorities, and global markets watch every hit on fuel infrastructure and munitions factories because the consequences ripple into energy prices, civilian safety, and alliances. If Kyiv's campaign escalates further into deeper strikes, debates in Washington, Brussels and London will get louder over whether enabling Kyiv to reach deeper is stabilizing by degrading Russia's ability to wage war, or destabilizing by bringing the conflict closer to what Moscow frames as its homeland. On the ground, practical consequences are immediate and human. Workers at struck facilities are injured or homeless. Towns downwind of burning terminals endure air quality hazards. Supply convoys that previously relied on one depot face rationing. In the short term, frontline units may need to fire fewer rounds or redistribute stockpiles. Hospitals and civil services sometimes feel these shocks indirectly when fuel and electricity margins tighten. For civilians watching from both sides, the psychological effect is severe. The sense that the war is no longer distant, that safety behind the front is an illusion. That kind of fear reshapes public opinion, which in turn shapes political decisions about how the war is fought and how much risk national leaders are willing to accept. An attack on an oil terminal in Crimea thus resonates beyond the military domain. It has implications for civilian energy supply and winter preparedness. This timing is a calculated stress point, degrades supplies now, and the downstream social and military impact grows more severe as weather tightens. Expect, therefore, to see emergency fuel rationing discussions, redirected shipments, and a scramble to find alternative storage or transport routes if damage at terminals is significant. Technologically, the strikes underscore the growing importance of unmanned systems, integrated intelligence, and electronic warfare on modern battlefields. Timed operation that may use decoys, hardening suppression, and multiple vectors. That complexity favors actors who have invested heavily in reconnaissance, decentralized command, and rapid decision loops. Ukraine's leadership has signaled such an investment across the last 2 years. These strikes show the payoff of that investment. What should viewers watch for in the next days and weeks? First, independent satellite imagery and commercial analysis, confirming the scale of damage at the Sverdlov ammunition plant, the Crimean terminal, and the 18th Army Depot. Those visual confirmations will firm up understanding of the operational impact. Second, movements in Russia's internal security posture, hardened storage, added air defenses near key industrial nodes or emergency fuel shipments. Third, retaliatory strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure. Moscow has already shown a pattern of counter-striking energy and transport targets in response to Ukrainian operations. Fourth, diplomatic movement emergency meetings in capitals that may discuss delivery of additional long-range systems or additional sanctions to isolate the economic ripple effects. Each of these signals will help tell whether this campaign is a one-off surge or the start of a sustained Ukrainian strategy to sever Russia's operational depth. We should also discuss the limits and the costs. Striking deep is not cost-free. Long-range operations risk exposing sources and methods. Attritional use of drones and precision munitions depletes stocks that Kyiv also needs on its front lines. For Western partners, authorizing transfers of more and deeper reach systems is politically fraught. Yet Kyiv's strategic logic is clear: accept short-term costs to avoid being ground down by a materially superior adversary that can outproduce and outstock Ukraine in a war of attrition. If Kyiv can force Russia's logistics and production to become more fragile, Ukraine increases its chances of strategic survival until more systemic shifts, whether international pressure, mobilization, weaknesses, or shifts on the battlefield, alter the calculus. In the end, this episode is another reminder that modern conflict is not just fought with tanks and artillery, but with the unseen architecture of supply, fuel, and production. Kyiv's strikes on ammunition plants, oil terminals, and weapons depots are asymmetric choices meant to undermine the very infrastructure that underpins Moscow's campaign. They are bold, consequential, and risky. They are also, for now, a clear signal that the war's geography of danger is expanding, and that those who keep watching closely, with careful verification and calm analysis, will be best positioned to understand what comes next. Subscribe for continuing updates as we track satellite imagery, government statements, and on-the-ground reporting in the hours and days ahead.